Well, it looks like a new challenger has arrived in the Android front-end space, and it could be my new favourite. Let's take a look at NeoStation. So, welcome to NeoStation. I genuinely believe this could be one of the best front ends, and I'll tell you why. This front end is open source. Now, if you don't know what that means, allow me to explain. Basically, a lot of the front ends you see, or a lot of apps you see, the source is closed. So you don't know what is actually going on in that code base. You don't know what's happening. It might work. It could be doing some less than stellar things under the surface. Obviously, in the cases of apps like Cocoon and that, which are closed source, we know they're by the book. They're pretty well developed by people who know what they're doing. There's nothing wrong with something being closed source. However, with the rise of AI and a lot of dodgy telemetry stuff that seems to be getting embedded into a lot of these projects, it's good to know that the developers of NeoStation have made it open source so you can see the raw source code on the GitHub page. Now, this is huge because it means that anyone can contribute to that source code, and that will help progress the development so much quicker than a lot of the closed source ones, purely because you've got a much larger knowledge base to choose from, and people can raise bugs and squash bugs as quickly as possible. So that's very exciting. So let's take a look. So we have here, so this is just the default theme. There's only one that it comes with. Like I said, it is still relatively new. I believe it launched at the end of last year, but I've only literally heard about it 24 hours ago, thanks to 2-Bit Sprite in my Discord. So that is something very exciting. So here we have just the systems I've got installed. I don't have many games on my Odin 3. I say that, I've probably got about 100 or something, still a fair bit. So we've got these nice little systems. We can, if I press my X button, we also get a carousel view, if you prefer a carousel view. And you can also see at the bottom here, you've got the little buttons as well that jumps across. And they are touchscreen compatible, so you can just jump to a particular section if you wish to. So I much prefer a grid mode. You can also sort by alphabetical. You can sort by release year, which I quite like. I like release year as a sorting, especially for consoles. You can have manufacturer. You can have manufacturer and type, which I think splits them into console and handheld. Doesn't seem to change too much, but I don't have much. So we'll go for release year. I do quite like release year. So let's go and have a look. So we look at our all games. So you can see here, I've run the scraper on this. So I've got my logos, I've got my backgrounds. I think they're fan arts, I believe. And then if you look at this UI, you can see we've got some really gorgeous artwork. I love how simple but effective the UI looks. One of my main criticisms of a lot of front ends is feature bloat and scope creep. So the fact that this seems to have a level of polish already at this early stage is incredibly admirable and very exciting. So let's take a look around. So just behind my fat head, you can see there's this play button. We also have a little time tracker as part of the play button. So 8 seconds was all I could manage of Nightmare on Elm Street, and then I got too scared. Next to me, we have, if I favorite this, I don't want to do much on Nightmare on Elm Street because it's at the top of the list, but if I go to Airblade, then I press favorite, it will store my favorites at the top of the list. You can also re-scrape games. So if you implement a scraper, so I don't know why it says the system's not mapped, because I've definitely signed in. So as always, this is currently in development. There will be bugs, and there is some bugs that I do want to point out shortly. You also see there's this no save synced and ready, or it's whilst it's scanning, on the far left there. So what that is one of the features that this comes with is I think it's called NeoSync, which I'll cover shortly. And basically it's a save syncing app that's built into it. It is a paid app. There is a free tier. I'll go through shortly kind of the different tiers and things like that. I think it's a cool idea. However, it does seem to be only limited to RetroArch at the moment, which for me, who primarily plays PS1, PS2, isn't ideal. Obviously, that's not down to the fault of the developers of NeoStation and NeoSync. It's purely an issue with how those apps expose their file system. So hopefully one day there'll be a PS1 and a PS2 emulator that allows us to access those save data. But for RetroArch, I just use SyncThing. So don't know if something I get the most use out of, but good to know that that's included straight out of the box. So you can see our achievements there. So you can see on Airblade, I've got 4. And one thing I love, so if you look at the top here, so I've got these my LBRB. So if I go across, you can see that we have a little game description. And if you leave it playing for a second, it plays a little video. The videos do have audio, or you can play audio. They start unmuted, but either this system's muted or the video doesn't have audio. Let's find out. I think the video is muted, so that's sort of very cool. And I like that it exposes the game info isn't too crushed, and you can see quite a lot of it. Over here we have achievements, and this is a feature I absolutely adore. And one of the things I really love about it is not only does it show you the achievements that you've achieved and the ones you need to unlock, is just by looking at them, you can clearly see the achievement descriptions. Whereas a lot of front ends, they show you the icons, but you don't get that quick visibility until you click into it or something like that. So to know and how many points it's worth, I don't know if there's a highlight for missable. It'd be good if there was some sort of flag for something that's missable. But again, something that could always be added. The beauty of open source software. If I was a smarter man, I'd do it myself. Then we have our settings. So we have our cloud sync. So you can enable this on a per game basis if you wish. But like I said, for the PS2, it wouldn't really do anything. We also have, you can have custom emulators per game as well if you prefer. Now, I did have an issue with the PS2 emulator. So I had to install the patch version of NetherSX2 on my Odin whilst I was originally using the standalone turnip version. I noticed inside the systems file that the app ID was wrong for the turnip version. So I changed it myself and I still couldn't get it to work. So hopefully, again, a smarter man than I or a smarter person than I can correct that. So I've had to use the standalone one. So it does say system default there because I've got it set at system default. I do wish it highlighted which one the system default actually was rather than it being up here, but that's a minor nitpick. So one last thing before we look more at the settings. If I go back to my game, one thing I also really like, I don't know if you can spot it there at the top next to that cheeky little back button, is a random button. So if I press my select button, or whatever it's called, on the Odin, we get this little spinner, and then we can play the game or we can roll again. And it's so simple, but I just love that it kind of cycles through. I'd love if it had some like dice sound effects, but like I said, can't seem to hear anything, so I don't think there's any music playing currently. It's definitely not muted, so I love the little kind of roulette wheel sound effect. It'd be nice, but I do love this, and it's so simple. So for those of you who do suffer with choice paralysis, then hopefully that can kind of nudge you in the right direction to playing some classic games. Now, let's have a look at the rest of the app. So if I go across to these tabs, so NeoSync. So this is what I mentioned before. So here is NeoSync. So you can see there I've got a Super Mario Advance 4 save when I was messing around before. So I believe that's a save state. Yeah, you can see there it's in the states folder. So it does save states and saves. However, you can see there that one game took up 128 kilobytes. I'm on the free tier, which is just 4 megabytes. So if I press Y to upgrade, here is the prices. So you can see for $2 a month, you get 16 meg, 64 is 3, 256 is 4, or a gig is 5. Now that's pretty good going. And if it did more than RetroArt, I probably would pay the $5 just to have all my saves backed up. I run a server anyway, like a home server, so my saves are backed up using SyncThing. But it would be ideal. But if this is something you can get mileage out of, I'll demonstrate the syncing. I've got my Thor next to me here as well. So when we look at the Thor side, I'll demonstrate the saves syncing across as well. So that's an option for you if you like. You can also see here if I go back. Uh, there will be ROM, which I covered recently, which is a self-hosted ROM library management, and Google Drive. So I'm assuming that's possibly for save files or if you store your ROMs on a Google Drive, but these are currently in progress. So if there's any of you out there, developers, feel free to dive into the GitHub and start contributing. Then we have our achievements. Now, I didn't notice with the achievements, I believe this is only pulling the public profile. It didn't ask for a password. I just put my username in and it worked, which I don't know why it says I'm a softcore user because I'm actually an elite gamer. But you can see there, I recently played Mortal Kombat with 30, which has 39 chiefs. My latest order was Metal Gear Solid 4 years ago. Did I play on New Year's Eve? I need to get out more. And you can also see the achievement of the week is Medieval 2. So that's a cool little feature as well to be able to see the achievement of the week and just because they have a lot of community events and things like that. So it's good to have that quick glance. You can see there's 3,000 players who are going for Medieval 2's Tusks of Terror. So here we have our scraper settings. So the first time you see this, you'll see it will have a please log into Screen Scraper. If you haven't got a Screen Scraper account already, I fully recommend it. Again, there's a free tier. One thing I really like about this version, and I'll show you shortly when we do a full, I'll show you the onboard and the setup guide at the end of the video. You might notice this thing here, max threads. So if you have a premium account, the higher tier you are, the more threads you get, which means that rather than scrape one by one by one, you can scrape multiple at a time. In my case, a maximum of 6. So that, it absolutely flew by. You can see I've got 12,000 requests there. So obviously I have a few different devices with a few thousand games on. So for each request, that's a piece of artwork or a manual or a video or whatever it might be. So I've not got 12,000 games. Not on this device anyway. So scraping, you can start. It's got a lot of the same filters that a lot of front ends have. Obviously, you can scrape new content if you add some new games, or you can force it to do all. You can toggle media. There's not much granular control. I think there'll probably be some more granular control coming at a later update. So at the moment, it's just you can have all the images, all the videos, and nowhere in between. You also have your language. This is just preferred. You can only currently set 1, so there's no option for backups. And the selection is quite small. We don't have anything like Japanese or world in there. So hopefully, again, something that's added later. You can also scrape on a per system basis. So obviously, these are all the folders I have installed currently. So pretty straightforward. I'll cover more of the screen scraper scraping when I show you the onboarding. And then for our settings, these are all quite simple. Scan folders on startup, which I advise you just leave on. Apparently there is UI navigation sounds, but I can't hear them. No idea. Maybe I've muted something. You can set it as your default launcher there. On the Odin, I don't tend to use front ends as a default, just because I like having the kind of main quick step that I can get to my apps, and then I just have my game emulation front end as an option. And then in our directories, you can add multiple directories. This is just my normal ROM storage. So if you have external folders or you've organized it slightly differently, you can do so there. You can customize the systems that show on the home screen. So if you want to have the recents card, you can enable that or disable it. Don't know why you disable it. It looks great. Palettes. Now, these are just little color palettes. I think they look really, really nice. Got that Groove Box one, nice kind of yellow. Not a great, a decent amount of choice to start with, but not a ton. And there's no way to kind of customize them to the level of, say, something like Cocoon. It's either you have all or you have nothing. Next up, we have themes. Oh, I'm gonna press the right thing. There we go. So currently, you can have no theme or you can have NeoStation. So no theme, it just has like abbreviations for the system names. So the NeoStation theme, just for now. Like I said, as this gets further into development, I'm sure some genius theme makers out there will jump in the ring and start really showcasing what this kind of thing could do. I don't know in terms of ESDE, where you can customize things like the XML and completely revolutionize the layout. I've no idea how deep this goes, but as it's open source, anything's possible. We also have about, so there is a Discord you can join, which I recommend. I've just joined that about an hour ago. So you see what version we've got, and you can see this is the official website there. So do check that out. So that is it for the single screen. So actually, before we cover that, so in order to customize your emulators, what you need to do is if you hover over a system and press the start button, you get these system settings. So you can choose to show the ROM name if you like in the games list, or you can prefer to just have the scraped title. I prefer the scraped title because it looks neater. You can hide the system logo. You can have it recursive. So if you've got ROMs inside folders, for example, then it can scan within then. It can automatically hide parentheses. Don't know why she used parentheses and brackets. I assumed they were the same thing. Could be wrong. And then for emulators. So like I mentioned earlier, so in the RetroArch ones, you can just select your core from here. It doesn't detect which ones you've already got installed. So if you try and load something and you haven't got that core installed, it will crash. So be wary of that. But like I mentioned, for the PS2 one, so I have both the standalone Nether SX2 installed and the Turnip driver version. No matter what I did, going into the files and manually trying to point it at the Turnip app, it just would not work. So hopefully in a future update, that will be resolved. So like I said, although this is a single screen front end, let's take a look at what it looks like on the AYN Thor. So here it is on the AYN Thor. You can see kind of similar to the ESD companion app or Cocoon. You've got the system artwork that cycles on the bottom with the logos. And if we go into our games list, you can see that you get it doesn't have the screenshot tab that it did at the top. Instead, it moves that to the bottom. And if you hang fire for a second, you do get the videos that play automatically. So there's not a great deal of difference between the two. If I jump into a game, I'm just curious to see what happens when we jump into a game. Oh. So this is where you need to make sure you've set those emulators properly. And I haven't. There we go. So it looks like on the bottom screen, it just has the screenshot. Like I said, definitely more of a single screen geared front end, but hopefully once more developers get involved and as the development progresses, then it'll start taking advantage of the AYN Thor. If I go into NeoSync, I'm back on my Thor again, you can see there is that online save that was on my Odin. I haven't transferred it myself, it's all been automatic. And one thing I did notice is it didn't sync immediately, so if I just tap this little refresh button, it refreshes the cloud storage. So like I said, if that's something, I think the free version will probably do the majority of you. Obviously, you can chuck them a few dollars if you want to upgrade that. If it ever gets to the point where they can implement PS1, PS2, then I'll be all over this. But for now, Sync Thing covers my use case. Okay, so that's a front end you're interested in, then here is how to install it. So first you want to go over to neostation.dev. This is the official website. Basically shows off some of the features. And one thing I forgot to mention is this is not only available on Android, it's also available on other devices as well. For example, Windows, Linux, Mac OS. I haven't tried these versions, but I will be trying them at some point and doing separate videos on those. And then there's links to the Discord and GitHub in there as well. So obviously we're concerned about the Android one. So you can press download APK or you can press get it on Obtainium. So I'm going to press get it on Obtainium. And what this will do, if you've got Obtainium installed, it'll flip you right over and you can just press continue. It'll import the app. And then from there, you can see somewhere. There it is right at the bottom. NeoStation is available. I've already installed it, so you just see that little update thing there. If you don't have Obtainium installed, install it. I'll leave a link in the description or check out my other videos on setting up the Odin or the AYN Thor. or you can just press download APK and it will take you straight to the link of the latest APK, in which case you can install it manually. So if you're an Obtainium, just tap that, give it a second. It's not a massive app. Don't know why it said updates, probably because I've already got it installed. So now it's there. Let's boot up NeoStation. So I have noticed the first time you boot it up, sometimes it hangs for a second and it says, oh, it's crashed. Do you want to wait or do you want to close the app? Hit wait a few times and then it'll play catch up. And then once you do it, it seems to work fine. But that first one can be a bit finicky. So first, we're going to grant access to our storage. Then we're going to select our ROM folder where all our games are stored, in which case mine is just the ROMs folder on my Odin 3. I'm going to scan the ROMs. I've got a ton of folders, but most of them are completely empty because this is the Emulation Station folder layout. I do believe it does account for different naming conventions. For example, if you've called your PS1 games PS1 rather than PSX, it should still pick it up automatically without you having to mess about too much. So here we are with everything blank. So firstly, we can go across our tab at the top to NeoSync. You can select it and you can just log into there. Once you log in, it'll pull through your cloud saves. Then you can do the same thing for RetroAchievements, although like I mentioned earlier, for some reason it didn't ask for a password. It just logged me straight in and used my public facing profile, which is fine, but curious to see. That means anyone could log in as me, surely. Hopefully they lock that down at some point. And now Screen Scraper. So this one I am going to log into. So I will see you shortly. Okay, so I have logged in. So we can come down to our scraping mode. And if I just back out, you can see that I don't have any information or any metadata. So if I go to, actually, I'm going to log into my RetroAchievements account. Feel free to give me a follow. You can see there, I recently played Adventure Island a couple of minutes ago on the Thor. So let's go to our scraper and I'm just going to press start. So you can see here that it's scraping 6 games at once. So this is why I advise get a screen scraper account. You can give them a one-off donation. I think it, for the max one, which this is, I think it was about €10. Which is well worth it. Obviously, I scrape stuff constantly when I'm showing like front end setups and things like that, but it has probably the greatest collection of metadata, and just being able to chuck them a few quid and get access to it processing things much faster is a lifesaver. You can see in the 30 seconds I've been talking, we're already a quarter of the way through, and I've recently tried a upcoming update of a quite popular front end, and I was going to do a video on it tonight, but it was so painstakingly slow to scrape. I thought I'll have to leave it running overnight, and then we'll catch up in the morning. So this is infinitely better. I do appreciate they've given me access to all these threads, but as far as I'm aware, 6 is the max, unless I'm missing a trick. So I'll give this a few seconds, and I'll jump back to when this is all done. Okay, so there we are. So it's scraped 146 out of 147 with one failure, which I know what that is, and it always fails. And it only took just over 2 minutes. So one thing we don't have yet, unfortunately, is we have individual scraping, but unlike something like ESDE, where if a game is slightly misnamed, or if it can't detect it in the case of, I know it's going to be big hops, because it's always big hops that gives me this issue. In order to rectify it, for example, in ESDE, I can just manually search for it and select it from there. With this at the moment, when you manually scrape, it will just search the same game again. So you don't have that level of control yet, unfortunately. But again, hopefully something that's covered in a future update. Now, let's make it look a bit prettier by picking a theme. So we'll go for the NS Lite one, and we'll pick the NeoStation theme. So I'll have to download the theme assets. So I am hoping at some point there will be a theme repository. I'm certain there will be. And we can see already looks loads better. And then we'll go into, I have a lot fewer games on on my Odin than I do on my Thor. But you can see It scrapes everything, dead easy to set up. So you could set up this whole thing in no time at all. So just one final thing is obviously make sure you do just hover over your system, press your start button, and make sure, obviously, for some of these retro arches, make sure you've got the right version installed. That can be quite confusing. And then make sure you've got the right core installed. I do hope that as development continues on this is still early days and it's already showing so much promise and so much polish, then I am hoping at some point that the onboarding process is a little bit more involved in terms of you select the emulators as part of the onboarding rather than doing it at this point. But I'm so impressed with what I've seen already, and I'd love ESDE. I've been singing its praises for ages. I'm a massive fan of Cocoon and RetroPup and Isu and what those guys are doing. But this one, if the development continues as it has been, this genuinely could be the one. And there we are. That was NeoStation. And without hyperbole, I genuinely think that could be my new favorite front end in the long run. Well, obviously, we'll see how things develop. And I tend to chop and change anyway. As it's a single screen based one, it's probably something I'll use on my Odin. I'm probably going to stick with Cocoon on the Thor for now, just because it's the most far ahead in terms of dual screen implementation. But who knows where we'll be in a month, 6 months, 12 months' time, by the time the Thor 2 comes out, whenever that might be. So if you like this video, I'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. I'm pleased to announce that my website is under construction, so that will have text versions of my setup guides. I'll also be doing guides for some other devices. For example, I've recently got a TrimUI brick hammer and a Miu Mini Flip 2, and I've also ordered the Ambonic RG Rotate, which I'm very excited for because I love a good gimmick. So if you like this video, I'd appreciate a like, appreciate a subscribe, tell your friends, and I'll see you next time.